Letters to a Young Therapist by Mary Pipher. Part 1, Winter. Chapter 1, Breadcrumbs. December 2nd. Dear Laura, last night I sorted through some old black and white photographs. In one of my baby pictures, I am asleep with a magazine on my chest. Even then, I read myself to sleep. In another, I pose joyfully in a high chair covered with dinner, happily stuffing cake into my mouth. Still today, good food is one of my greatest pleasures. Another photo shows me standing beside my brother Jake in front of a big red brick building. It's our first day in a new school. We're dressed in ill-fitting old-fashioned coats. We look skinny and scared, our eyes wide with alarm. He's leaning into me and I'm holding his hand. These pictures construct a breadcrumb trail through the forest of time that lies between the me who was born in the Ozark Mountains and the 55-year-old me who lives in Nebraska today. The girl who squeezed her brother's hand before marching into the schoolhouse echoes within the therapist who often says to clients, "Together we can make things better." As an old man, Mark Twain said, "I have arrived at an age at which the things I remember most clearly never happened." Memory is constructed and reconstructed. It changes constantly and is as subjective as dreams. Still, I'd like to share my breadcrumb trail with you. I lived first in a small house my dad built when he returned to Missouri after World War II. A year later, we moved to Denver so my mother could go to medical school. After she graduated, my family's trail meandered to a number of small Nebraska towns, and then to Kansas, where I graduated from high school in 1965. 4 years later, I received my undergraduate degree from the University of California at Berkeley. Afterward, I bummed around Europe and Mexico before I settled down to graduate school and later to life in Lincoln as a wife, mother, and psychologist. From the beginning, no matter where I have lived, I have been restless, talkative, and intense. I have liked people, the natural world, and books. Certain defining moments shaped my thinking. I remember the night when I was 3 years old that I became a cultural relativist, although of course I didn't know the phrase at the time. This was in 1950, before antibiotics were widely used. My mother had lectured me frequently that after my baths, I must immediately dry my feet and put on my socks so that I wouldn't catch cold. But one night, my Aunt Agnes supervised me as I crawled out of her tiger claw bathtub and toweled off my feet. She admonished me, "Good little girls dry their bottoms first and then put on their underpants." I was surprised that two women whom I deeply trusted could disagree on a subject of such vital importance. My family life was an education in point of view. I was the oldest daughter in a big family with a doctor mother and a lab technician father who, when he wasn't working in hospitals, took time to raise pigs, geese, and pigeons. My mother's people were Methodists from eastern Colorado, poor ranchers but well-educated and civic-minded. My father's relatives were colorful, warm-hearted people from the Ozarks. I had a millionaire aunt who was liberal, a farmer uncle who voted for Barry Goldwater, and another uncle who sold wieners and lard and had no interest in politics at all. My Aunt Margaret's family spent a year traveling around the world. My grandmother Glessie May was married to a man who lived a long life and died without ever leaving Christian County, Missouri. He asked rhetorically, "Why would I want to leave paradise?" At our house, emotional people played cards with Stoics. Sophisticates and provincials told long stories, and Southern Baptists shared chicken dinners with Unitarians. When we lived in Beaver City, Nebraska, members of our extended family would visit us for weeks at a time. My cousins and I would roam the fields, hike down to Beaver Creek, or bike around town looking for action on the quiet streets. At night, the adults played cards and argued politics. When conversations flagged around midnight, my dad would bribe the others, "Would you stay up if I fried some T-bones and potatoes?" I slept in a daybed just off the dining room, and I stayed awake listening to the sound of grown-ups talking. As I listened, I asked myself, why did certain people fall in love with each other? Why did one family forbid rock and roll in movies? Why did one uncle drink so much? Why did some relatives love FDR and others detest him? Why was one cousin a bully and another wonderfully patient with me? I worked at my mom's office counting out pills and sterilizing rubber gloves and surgical equipment. I heard the nurses whisper about things that most kids didn't know, that the woman who cleaned the bank was a prostitute, that the rich farmer who sent my mother flowers wanted her to perform an abortion for his girlfriend, and that the laughing man who ushered us into church was dying of leukemia. Every small town has a cast of characters right out of Shakespeare. I knew the town drunk, the saintly or bitter shut-ins, the old soldiers, and the gay choir director. My school teachers were of mixed caliber, some indifferent and ignorant, others fiercely dedicated to teaching us the chief exports of Peru and China and how to diagram sentences. I chatted with hard-working merchants, hoodlums with ducktail haircuts, a kind-hearted undertaker, and a hot-tempered mayor. Our next-door neighbors believed it was sinful to wear shorts in public. That meant his sons couldn't play basketball, and none of the kids could swim at our public school. A harsh religion indeed. Another breadcrumb on the trail was my role as family leader. My parents were away from home most of the time, and we kids experienced a great deal of benign neglect. Many times we trudged through a blizzard 8 blocks to school, only to discover that school was canceled for the day. Summer mornings, I would dish myself a bowl of ice cream for breakfast, and then decide whether I'd rather spend the morning at the library or under our apricot tree playing with other kids. I was the planner and fixer in my family. One day when I was 5, my aunt asked my dad if our family wanted to go on a picnic. He answered, "Ask Mary, she plans everything." Some psychologists would immediately label me as a parental child, prematurely responsible, and they would tisk-tisk in sympathy. But I see it differently. I had an important family role which offered me authority and autonomy. I learned very young the joys of working hard and being useful. I developed skills in cooking, caring for children, making decisions, and organizing people. I discovered that the way to get my needs met was to first meet the needs of others. If I could tell people stories, bake them cookies, and make them laugh, I would be loved. The prejudice in my town was another breadcrumb. The crippled son of our drugstore owner once made the terrible mistake of trying to kiss another boy, and after that his life was a perpetual hell. To this day I shudder when I think of the punishment inflicted on him for being different. There were twin brothers, Denny and Kenny, unwashed and neglected, who were teased mercilessly for the crime of being sons of a convicted murderer. Another kid, Herbert, had some kind of dental problem that caused him to spit and slobber when he spoke. Children wouldn't go near him because he had germs. Finally, there was Naomi Rainwater, a Native American girl who attended our school. Students just totally ignored her, as if having brown skin made her invisible. Even as a kid, I sensed all this was wrong. I was too young to know what to do about it, but I didn't like it, and I stayed out of cruel games. I wish I could say I stood up for the children I've mentioned, but I didn't do that either. Maybe that is why I try to stand up for people now. I have something to atone for. Our town was surrounded by prairie dog villages. A more remote place in America is hardly imaginable. The skies sparkled clearer then, and I remember the northern lights and winter stars tense with frost. In the pre-television world, time unfurled slowly. I lazed under the elms in the town square, visiting with old men and babies. I sipped limeade and read comics at the drugstore, and at night, my friends and I sprawled in the grass, looked at the Milky Way, and told ghost stories. I learned to depend on the natural world for comfort and entertainment. After rainstorms, I rescued baby birds and mice, and once I raised a magpie to be my summer companion. In the spring, our family bought baby coyotes from bounty hunters, and we played with them until fall. Then we released them by Beaver Creek. We picked up turtles and snakes off the highways and kept them in aquariums. I was outdoors every moment I could be, and I learned that whenever I was bored or upset, Mother Nature would take care of me. By the time I was 12, I had read every children's book in our town library, not a great feat because the collection was small. I liked the biographies of Helen Keller, Albert Schweitzer, Eleanor Roosevelt, and Madame Curie. I loved A Tree Grows in Brooklyn, The Good Earth, and a book called The Silver Sword about heroic Polish children who survived without parents during World War II. At this age, I also discovered the Diary of Anne Frank, and it stunned me. For the first time, I encountered evil, not just misguided, impulsive, or confused actions of which I had seen plenty, but truly evil ones. For weeks afterward, I didn't eat or sleep well. I couldn't imagine a point of view that allowed adults to murder children. My mind struggled to comprehend this new information about what humans could do to each other. but paradoxically, the story also taught me about heroism. Anne Frank remains my greatest hero. Sometimes my books landed me in trouble. Once on a family vacation, I was reading Erich Fromm's The Art of Loving. This was a popular psychology book exploring the nature of intimacy. My dad glanced with alarm at the title. He surmised I had descended into smutty material and threw my beloved book into our campfire. Reading transported me all over the world. It entertained me and calmed me down when I was rattled from family arguments or a rough day at school. With books, I could be in my family's kitchen stirring bean soup, and also in London with David Copperfield, on the trail of jewel thieves with the Dana sisters or Nancy Drew. My mind became roomier. If we conceive of life as a calendar year, beginning with spring and ending in deepest winter, then I am in the late autumn of my life. The season encourages an examination of the past. The stuff I took for granted as a girl, long summer days when nothing happened, aunts canning tomatoes or making mincemeat pies, fall evenings smelling of burning leaves, makes me ache with longing as a middle-aged woman. Laura, you are in the early summer of your life. I am curious to see how your seasons will unfurl. Next supervision session, I'd like to hear more about your history. You told me that in school you were the student other kids talked to about their problems. Being a confidant is part of your breadcrumb trail, as it is for many in our field. An examination of your past can help you know yourself better. Knowing yourself helps with your life as well as with your work. Chapter 2, Virtues, December 26th. Dear Laura, I just returned from our family Christmas celebration. We gathered for a potluck dinner followed by plum pudding and a gift exchange. Over guacamole, my niece told me she planned to be a webmaster, a profession not even invented when I was her age. We had a good talk about choosing a career, about the difference between being good at something and liking it, and about how work shouldn't be just about money. My niece told me she had heard there were jobs for webmasters in Tampa, and she'd always wanted to live near a beach. Our discussion led me to reflect on my own decision, made impulsively 30 years ago, to be a psychologist. Because I couldn't secure funding for graduate school in anthropology, I more or less bumbled into psychology. On a whim, I walked into the campus psychological consultation center and met the director of the clinical program. He encouraged me to consider the PhD program and guaranteed funding. I was damn lucky. I loved graduate school. I've been able to work as a therapist, consultant, teacher, writer, and speaker, all because I was a psychologist. Laura, I know you wonder if you have the talents to be a good therapist. Permit me to have an Aunt Mary conversation with you on that topic. We therapists end up sitting in small, often uncomfortable rooms, 8 hours a day, listening to one person after another talk about unresponsive mates, surly teenagers, and control-freak bosses. Unless we have abiding curiosity, hour after hour of such conversations can be tough slogging. We who like the work tend to be fascinated by the infinite variety of ways in which humans get themselves in and out of trouble. Doing therapy requires energy, focus, and patience. It's not particularly remunerative or prestigious, and unless you are motivated by a desire to help others, you are unlikely to last. Therapist Harry Aponte said that he couldn't work with people unless he saw something of himself in them, and they saw something of themselves in him. Just as respect tends to be mutual, so does contempt. Unless your basic feelings toward most people are positive, therapy is not for you. One of my writing teachers once advised me, if your message for the world is that life is shit, spare the reader. Not a bad dictum for therapists as well. People come into therapy when they feel whipped. A great deal of our work is about hope. I can still picture Kimberly, a beautiful pregnant woman with waist-length blonde hair, sobbing for 50 minutes, unable to talk after telling me, I have MS. That first session, I passed her Kleenex and listened. At the end, I hugged her and invited her back in 2 days. During our second session, we talked about her 3 young kids and her husband, who wasn't much of a provider, and who leaned on her for decision-making and emotional support. She cried some more. I said, you have already done the hardest thing, which is to face this problem. And I continued, you'll get through this. You are stronger than you think. Your family will do their best. At the end of that second session, I asked, "What can you do to cope with the next few days?" Tearfully, Kimberly answered, "Tonight, I'll take my girls to the park." Hope was my primary gift to Svetlana, a shy girl who was the victim of much teasing in middle school. By the end of the 9th grade, she had internalized all her peers' scorn and no longer believed in herself. As I got to know her, I discovered her love of animals and her wry sense of humor. I helped her find a place she could ride horses and supported her decision to take a volunteer job at the Humane Society. Svetlana developed new skills which built up her confidence. Her work with animals carried her away from her mean-spirited classmates to older, wiser people. I made a few predictions. Over the summer, you'll be surprised by moments of happiness and confidence. Next year, you will meet a kindred spirit. For the most part, my predictions came true. The summer of horses was a happy one, and in the fall, Svetlana marched bravely into high school. She did make a good friend, but she told me, "I'd rather shovel manure than face the 100% screwed upness that is high school." Fair enough, I conceded. I couldn't fix everything. Most of us are in this work for deeply personal reasons that we need to acknowledge. I grew up nurturing and caretaking as the big sister. But alas, I'm also pretty good at being bossy and overly responsible. I have to watch both of these tendencies as a therapist. We need to recognize when we are getting our clients mixed up with our mother, our elementary school principal, or our first boyfriend. We need to know whom we can help and whom we can't. For example, I am lousy at working with violent men. They scare me, and I can't forgive them for hurting women and children. While I don't think we therapists need to be paragons of mental health, I do think we need to be reasonably well-adjusted. Addicts, psychopaths, and self-deluded therapists damage vulnerable clients. We need good people skills. I acquired mine as a waitress. All through high school, I was a car hop at an A&W root beer stand. In college, at various greasy spoons and donut shops, I dealt with crabby, persnickety customers and with snobs, drunks, and cheapskates. I also met charmers, jokers, and some of the kindest folks imaginable. By the time I figured out how to get along with John Q. Public, I had a good education in the vagaries of humanity. Graduate students whom the other students avoid because they are abrasive or strange had best seek other work. My class included one psycho-noxious therapist. Rob was a bitter, sarcastic person who seemed to enjoy making other people feel small. As our introductory therapy class watched Rob's sessions on videotape, we squirmed in our seats. When he tested a patient at our state mental hospital, he precipitated a psychotic break in his client. When he saw his first client, a depressed English major, he soon had her in tears with his hostile questions. "Do you really expect me to believe that? Are you trying to manipulate me? Why didn't you do something more intelligent?" Our teacher looked stunned and remained silent. But a few weeks later, Rob transferred into experimental psychology, where he worked mostly with rats. One of the luxuries of our work is that it sustains idealism. Unlike cops, landlords, or bar owners, therapists tend to grow fonder of humans the longer they are in our field. That's because we come to understand the world from the point of view of others. We see that most people want to be good. Being a client was one of my best lessons in being a therapist. When I first called for an appointment, my voice cracked with embarrassment. I felt stupid and vulnerable. I learned how hard it was to admit failures and to share secrets with a stranger. I cared desperately about what my therapist thought, and I took his smallest remarks seriously. I noticed what kinds of pens he used and when he blinked. My therapist was a low-key guy without pretensions. I saw him at his house Saturday mornings. His wife would hand me a cup of coffee and show me to his small office. He would smile, ask me what was up, and then really listen to what I had to say. He didn't analyze me and rarely gave advice. Sometimes he made small jokes. Mainly, he was kind. Once when I was trying to describe how I felt, he gently suggested the word angry. At precisely the moment I was ready to do so, he helped me identify a feeling I couldn't easily acknowledge. Good therapists have a tolerance for ambiguity. The human condition is variegated, multifaceted, and particular. There is no one-size-fits-all way to proceed. In the end, the answer to most questions is, it depends. Rigid therapists who think, it's my way or the highway, are flops. Their black and white smugness drives clients who live in gray worlds crazy. In our town, there's a therapist who is a one-trick pony. All his clients, no matter what their problems or personalities, receive his brand of confrontive, behavioral-focused short-term therapy, which can be useless or even harmful to some clients. Labeling a problem as complex is one of my more effective therapeutic approaches. Clients appreciate not being pigeonholed. It is a way of respecting people to describe their situations as complicated. If problems felt simple, clients wouldn't be in therapy. Complex is a non-judgmental word that buys time and space. It suggests that circumstances may be examined for new and surprising revelations. Therapists need to be able to sort true from untrue, deep from shallow, and temporary from long-term. We need what Hemingway referred to as foolproof shit detectors. Muddled thinking and mealy-mouthed affirmations never help anyone. I once met a sweet but fuzzy-headed therapist at a psychotherapy institute. She told me that she gave unconditional positive regard to everyone, even psychopaths and borderlines. She quoted the Beatles, "All you need is love." I thought to myself, clients need much more than that. Almost all need clarity and perspective, and a few need a figurative kick in the butt. Non-judgmental can mean indiscriminate, and openness can mean rudderless. Our field has its share of space cadets, strange agents, and woo-woo practitioners. Good therapists walk a balance beam between maintaining old-fashioned common sense and encouraging new ideas. We can never know for sure that our understanding is profound or advice apropos. Much of our work is not hard science. Rather, therapy includes science, intuition, and kindness. What really works in therapy is a real person connecting to a real person. Don't be intimidated by what may look like a formidable list of virtues. These qualities occur naturally in most of the people interested in our field. That's why we work as therapists. We thrive on tackling human problems. Laura, except for years of experience, you possess everything you need to be a great therapist.